everyone, I'm Dr. Z and you're watching Dr. Z PhD, the place to be for expert info on gender. As always, I try to create content that's relevant to you, so a few days ago I asked all of you on Facebook, what topic would you like to hear about? And by the way, please feel free to comment below in the comments or to message me on Facebook if there's something you have in mind. Today's topic was brought to my attention by Tammy Jane. Thank you, Tammy Jane, for starting discussion on such an important and such a relevant issue for many. I'm talking about being misgendered. Now, many, if not all of you, at some point in your gender transition or in your gender expression have experienced being misgendered. And it's one of the worst things that can happen to anyone. It can be an incredibly unpleasant experience. So in today's episode, I'll talk about social cues or markers that may lead to being misgendered in spite of your gender presentation in hopes to help you understand why that does happen, as well as instances when people are being disrespectful or just being very rude. And I'll share various helpful ways that can help you handle situations when misgendering happens that seem to have helped a lot of other people. And remember, if you want more info like this every Friday, go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you know when I upload something new, and that way you don't get to miss any information. Now let's talk about being misgendered, an experience that is incredibly unpleasant and painful to go through. I mean, who would want to be disrespected, dismissed, and most importantly made feel as if they don't exist at all? Nobody, trust me, none of us want to feel like we're not being seen. And that's exactly what being misgendered feels like. It feels like you're not being seen or recognized. But why does misgendering happen to begin with? I mean, what happens? Now, in my opinion, misgendering happens primarily due to adaptation. And what happens is that we automatically respond to binary view of gender due to evolutionary and due to social and also cultural adaptations. All of this stems from an engraved binary view of gender we have in today's society as primary, either male or female. This binary view is so deeply rooted in our brains and most importantly in our collective unconscious. So what happens is, as humans, when we encounter another human being, our brain performs a very quick assessment. And it just so happens that gender is one of the things we assess for. And as we assess, our brain has categories for male and a category for female. Sadly, these categories, as we know, are not correct because we know that gender is a broad spectrum. But we all have been taught, ever since we were little, at least I have, to recognize male from female and not to see other variations of gender expression. Just look back at your own childhood and you will recognize memories full of social cues based on binary ideas. But as we grow up and especially experience being socialized based on our own gender assigned at birth, binary gender recognition becomes really engraved in our brain. By the time we become adults, our brains have learned a very quick way to scan for any gender-specific markers. Say, for example, facial features, body features, the clothing that you wear, or the sound of your voice. And these binary gender-specific markers go either into male or female category within our brain. And depending on which category gets filled the most, we tend to blur out the gender designation. That's what happens. And that's exactly how misgendering happens. Of course, I realize that's not an excuse for misgendering someone, but it does explain how our brain has become a slave to a very binary view over the course of time. Now, let's talk about various instances of when misgendering happens, especially the types of groups of people who tend to be misgendered or who tend to do misgendering. I like to break them down into 4 groups. The first group is an innocent bystander. Most of the times, it's a genuine mistake on the part of their brain system. And many of you have actually experienced it when the person misgenders you and then will automatically apologize. Now, the reason why they automatically apologize is actually because they recognize that your gender presentation, the way you present, is not what their brain has just told them. This group of people often feels very stupid and will try to remedy the situation by continuing to apologize. So these are just kind of innocent misgendering folks. The second group is your family, friends, and anybody who has known you for a long time. And I know that for many of you, it's very difficult to understand how can your family continue getting your gender wrong. Let me explain what may be happening. Your family has had years of interacting with you based on your gender assigned at birth and have spent many years relating to you in that way. So apart from culturally engraved adaptation of male and female, they also have personally engraved adaptation of what you represent to them. So as a result, it can take family a while to assimilate. Now, of course, if your family is not accepting at all, that's a very different case. But if they are accepting and they make occasional mistake, chances are they also try to correct themselves as they go through the new assimilation in relationship to you. And then there's the third group of people. These are people who will go out of their way to misgender you. I would bet on the fact that these people have very strong internalized transphobia. These are people who have deeply rooted beliefs in only binary system. They often have also strong homophobic views as well. And majority, if not all of the violence toward gender diverse people tends to come from this group. These are people who will try to misgender you in a loud voice so that they can draw attention to you in order to humiliate you. They will try to go out of their way to use wrong pronouns or other derogatory names. These people are also trolls who will spend time leaving nasty comments on channels like this one. And hey, if you're one of them, I hope that this video helps you realize how your comments really hurt others. Then there's the last group of people. And this is my favorite group because they are an excellent example of those who don't misgender people. These are very mindful, self-aware people. I'm talking about people like yourself who are gender diverse, people like me who tend to work with gender diverse people, or other people who are just regular folks, but who tend to be very mindful of other human beings. Now, these people also do a quick assessment their brain is slave to, but instead of blurring out whatever genders their brain has told them, they're actually mindful enough to pause and to take in the entire picture. They often won't even assume what your gender is. They will either ask you politely or will use gender-neutral language. Now, this group also represents ideally what our society is actually capable of, which is moving away from being slaves to our binary views. And if we all learn to be more mindful, misgendering incidents would drastically reduce. So now that we identified various groups of people that tend to misgender, including the groups that doesn't misgender, let's talk about various ways that can help you handle when it happens to you. Before I start, let me just say that being misgendered is a very unpleasant experience. Even if it happens as a genuine mistake, it never feels good. And even if you grow thick skin and just don't care, it still doesn't feel good. When people get misgendered now by someone making an honest mistake, most people just completely ignore it. This is generally what I observed many of my clients do, and many of you have shared on Facebook when I ask you this question. Especially if it's someone you will meet once, maybe like a random stranger or a store clerk, correcting them or getting overly upset, for most of you just doesn't seem like it's worth it. Now, some of you have expressed correcting them, which is also an option. I know that some people feel it shouldn't be their responsibility to educate others, while some believe it's necessary. I will let you decide what's best for yourself and whatever makes you feel more comfortable. I always encourage everyone to think about your comfort level first. There is, however, a bit of information when you get misgendered as a genuine mistake, so hear me out. And this info is actually only helpful if your goal is to pass as one of the binaries. Say your goal is to pass as a woman or as a man. And if that's the case, and if you find yourself being often misgendered by people, then it might be a clue as to some aspect of your gender expression that's not yet passable. For example, if you get misgendered on the phone, that could be a clue that your voice needs more work. Again, if passability and only if passability is priority for you. If you get misgendered in public, it's a clue to ask yourself if some part of your features, maybe clothing or maybe your makeup or hair, that's causing it. This goes both ways, right? Because if you're no longer being misgendered, that's a strong clue that you are passing. So don't just dismiss being misgendered if your goal is passability. Use it as a tool to learn something from it, as it can aid you in transition. Now, if you get misgendered by your family or friends, of course it's important to correct them. I'm assuming here that your family and friends are supportive to begin with, right? And, they're just struggling to assimilate. If they're not being supportive at all, it's up to you to decide what the healthy boundary is for you at that point in time. I also believe it's very, very important to express to family and friends what it means to you and how painful it is actually to be misgendered. Why? Because many of cis people, like your family, take their gender for granted. And as a result, it's really hard for them to understand how getting your pronouns wrong is such a big deal. Especially parents, who will usually justify by saying, well, I love you no matter what. Expressing to them how being misgendered hurts can really help them understand the pain behind it. And now the worst group of people who misgender. First, let me just say that since we're talking about the group of people who have strong internal transphobia and are hateful, they're also often very reactive. So please, when you encounter this group of people, always consider your safety, because your safety should always become first. Many of you have shared misgendering these people back, right? Many of you have also chosen to try to educate them. And many of you decide that they're just not worth your time or your energy, and so you walk away. Personally, I always advise my clients to consider their safety first, then to decide for themselves what best course of action feels right for them. Some decide to educate this group of people in hope of reducing their ignorance. Now, can it be done with just one encounter? I don't know. I'm eager to say probably not. And only because as a psychologist, I know it takes a few encounters and maybe even getting to know someone to really dismiss and get rid of that inner hatred. So while some decide to educate, others decide to walk away. Now, I know some will argue that it's our responsibility to enlighten them or educate them, because if we don't, the world continues to be ignorant in regards to gender and will continue seeing only binary view. And while that may be true, not everyone feels a need to be an advocate, and we also have to respect that as well. So do what feels right for you. If advocating for yourself doesn't make you feel comfortable or safe, by all means don't do it. And if it feels very right for you, go for it. I'm sure there are other people who tend to misgender for reasons that I haven't mentioned in this video. And if you know any of those reasons, I'd love to hear about them below in the comments, so please comment below. Also, please comment below on how you handle when misgendering happens to you, because chances are someone else reading your comments may learn a new way of dealing with it. And please don't forget to like this video, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. And I look forward to seeing all of you next Friday. Bye.